I'm Aaron Fawn, and I'm on a trip for life.
I believe our future depends powerfully on how well we understand this cosmos, in which we float like a mote of dust in the morning sky.
In ancient times, there was a group of thinkers. They called themselves the alchemists, and they had two objectives. One was to improve themselves, and two was to find a mystical catalyst called the Philosopher's Stone, with which they could turn base materials into gold, in specific lead. Well, here at Cowpots, they've figured out an even more impressive trick. They've figured out how to turn into gold, or at least how to turn it into these. Let me show you how. Let's review the process by which they perform this amazing transmutation. First, they have to start with grass, since this product is made of manure. Then the grass has to be processed by cows, which incidentally also produce milk. And then the product is collected. This collected product is then digested and not otherwise processed. Let's see how they do that.
So the manure goes into the digester, and the digester, it cooks through the digester for 21 days. And then at the end of the 21 days, the liquid is separated from the solids. So the liquid, it's a fan separator. The separation room is where the liquid goes into the lagoon, and the dry, it comes down into this facility here. And this actually has a little auger, and the auger is actually augering it over, and it blows into the composter. So they now actually blow the manure, because it's so light and airy, they actually blow the manure into the barrel composter. So it's, and then this will continue to move, and then when they want to take it out, they just turn it in the opposite direction, and then it spills out. It's like a concrete mixer. So when we think about Yankee ingenuity, this is it. We actually have Housatonic Railroad in our town, and so Matthew went and bought a set of wheels from Housatonic Railroad, and this barrel is sitting on these wheels, and this is the barrel compost. The iron wheels is actually resting, and so this was actually designed so that it could turn. So this is actually what you want to call the meat and potatoes of the barrel composter. So there is a motor that actually will turn this very, very slowly. And so the way to turn manure into compost is just to aerate it. And so just like in your backyard composting, where they say to turn it, well, this is on a much larger scale. We are turning the manure to create the compost. The part that you see on the outside of this barrel is actually insulation, because what we're trying to do is, the way the compost works is that it needs to heat. So it has to be brought up to a certain temperature in order for the manure to break down. But when it overflows, then we would just pick this up, bring it over into that storage shed.
Yeah.
So all the manure, it's going somewhere. It just doesn't go random places. It actually has a place to go. During the winter, when the cows are in the barn all the time, we are cleaning the barns twice a day. So you're running equipment twice a day. So this time, and you have to run the equipment while the cows are being milked, because you don't want to disturb them. So the whole concept of cows out on pasture actually is an energy-saving concept. They spread their own manure, they collect up their own food. It's all good. This is the dry side of the manure. So when you separate the liquid from the dry, this is the fiber. So the liquid has nutrients, and so do the fibers.
That there is fully composted.
Yep.
And quite ready.
And it smells good.
Yeah, this doesn't smell bad at all.
Oh,
I know my
smell
viewers
vision.
can't smell this,
We
but
need smell
it doesn't
vision.
smell bad in here at all. It's
Sometimes
very
you read
dry.
about
It
it,
feels almost like a peat moss. Now that the manure has been worked over by bacteria and dried, it can be used to make the cowpots.
When you have to weigh out large volumes of manure, how do you do it? So he actually came up with the concept that, we have, on our farm, we mix up the feeds in a weigh wagon. And so a weigh wagon has a digital readout, which is what that is up there. And under the big box part of the wagon, there's these big mixers inside, and you dump in a bucket full of corn silage, and it weighs 1,000 pounds. Then you put another 1,000 pounds of haylage and 500 pounds of cornmeal and whatever. And so Matthew's like, well, that concept would work for the manure. So he took the weigh part, the important parts of the weigh wagon, took it off an old way wagon, sent this over to one of the jack ears in the valley who's a welder, and he's retired, well, not retired from farming, he's a young guy, but good welder. So he welded up a box, because Matthew basically says, this is what I want you to do, and he built it for him. So, and this is, when Mike Rowe was here, and he goes, where did you buy this? And basically, you come up with the idea, and you find people that help you to build it. So this is a box, and you stand on it, you can turn on the scale, and you can weigh it yourself. And if you need 100 pounds of manure, you shovel it out until you're 100 pounds lighter.
Now that they've weighed out the composted manure, they need to grind it into a fine powder to make it easy to mold. What function does this
this is just to make sure that you don't have large pieces of anything. So it's basically, you want everything to be consistent. It's when you're doing this kind of a molding process, everything has to be kind of like oatmeal, like even. Yeah. It's you don't want to all of a sudden have, oh, here's a clump of raisins, but everything is just evened out, and that way. And in reality, you have to have consistency. The very first pot you make,
these are manufacturing,
and the last pot you make has to be the same. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like my oatmeal raisin cookies. Cookies and manure. You know what clogs it up the worst? It's just little staples. So they actually have a little magnet at the top that takes it all out.
Due to the popularity of their product, the fine folks at the Freund Farm have had to come up with a robotic system for the construction of the cowpots. Now, since they built this system themselves, they don't want me to spill their secret sauce, and I respect that, so let's move on to the drying step.
This is a tray of semi-filled, wet 5-inch pots. So when you're looking, this is wet, but that is a wet cowpot. And if it smells like wet cardboard.
Yeah, it does.
But it's actually...
It looks like wet cardboard.
Yeah.
Once the pots have been given a few hours to dry at room temperature, they're then moved into an industrial kiln where they dry slowly at a low temperature until they've achieved the consistency and smell of dry cardboard. Let's look at what types of pots they have available.
So the 3-inch and then the 4-inch was the number 2 pot that we created. And then in between, we came up with a 6-pack. And then all of a sudden, things start to grow exponentially because now we have the 5-inch square. We have a 5-inch round. And then we have a 6-inch round. With each shape and each size, it presents a whole new set of parameters to deal with. And you notice that we have this like little angle. So every time you put an angle on a pot, you just make it a little stronger. Yeah. Right, and when you look at this, because you're handling it as a whole unit, it doesn't have all that. But notice that we've made a much larger hole, because the whole idea is that we wanted to use this on a capillary mat. Mm-hmm. So the capillary mat allows you not to have to water from the top, but the water would come from the bottom. And
much fewer pathological problems that way.
And the roots, right. And so this was a Gardener Supply concept. They used to use styrofoam. That was the same design, but styrofoam, and they wanted something a little more sustainable.
Now, onto the challenge of packaging a natural and somewhat uneven product.
And so if you're pushing on it, do you see what happened?
Yeah,
I broke it! I'm in trouble. I get fired. So, but then we build these, so when you're doing it in the beginning, you have little tools to help you. So here we are, like this is just a perfect example of...
there's some Yankee ingenuity.
Yeah, this is Yankee ingenuity. So like if you're trying to like pack it together... So before you have a robot doing the job, you have to know how to do it yourself. So there's no job. It's not like we invent things for robots to do without having done them ourselves. Yeah. So, but when you put the 4-inch pot on here, oh, here we go, and you're stacking it, then you can pack it evenly. Ah. And so the reason you need to pack it evenly is that it has to fit into a box. And then the process of getting, the robots to stack them. So that's really cool, because any job that you have that is monotonous and requires repetition, if you ever send somebody out to pick green beans, the first bushel they can do it really well because they can get that first bushel done. but the second bushel takes twice as long. So it's the same with stacking anything like this. The first rack that they do, I mean, you can't believe the competitions that we would have with the kids. You know, with 4 kids, and the boys are on one side, the girls are on the other, and like, we can pack Cowpots faster than you can, and so we could get it done fast. But in reality, it's a really boring job. So let's see if we can find a robot that will do it. So now you have a box that you need to put the Cowpots into. And so you can see that the box is always going to be the same shape. Manure is not a very consistent product. You know? I mean, no, we shouldn't go into the toilet discussion. It gets us into trouble.
Why not? Dirty Jobs made a lot of mileage off of that.
Yeah. Well, you know, but you can see that when you pack them evenly, then you can set them, and they sit. This was one of our earlier packaging designs, and when you're trying to figure out how do you package, man, that's a whole. I think you could spend 4 years in college and to study this one. But our concept initially was to do shrink wrap, but of course, one of our packaging design, when you're the box is totally biodegradable. So if you use the box, and then we start to learn that you have to have information on every single side. So, but this is we're still working on it. And, but I personally find this is very attractive, and, you know.
It's beautiful packaging, it actually.
If you want to influence people to buy your product, this is a great way to do it, because it's a very animated cow, and who doesn't love a cow? But at the same time, when you get right down to it, the people who are avid, sustainable gardeners who want natural things are not really looking at the pretty cow, they just want the pot.
So why even bother using pots that are made out of compost? Why not use pots that are made out of plastic in China? Well, because it's better for the plant and for the grower.
And what we're trying to do is show landscapers that this is a much quicker and easier, more efficient way. You know, because when you're landscaping and you're doing a big planting and you have all that plastic waste that's littering along your grass, and then you've got to pay an employee to pick it up. So this is just Rudbeckia that we're going to just leave out here and let it grow and see if see, look at that. It's got the roots coming out.
They seem to be holding together pretty well despite the exposure.
The way this works is it air prunes. So when the root comes out, and then if it hits the air, it will just prune out. And so then when you put it into the ground, the roots are all sitting there on the edge of the pot going, there's soil! And then they just take off. And I can show you my tomatoes over at the in the tomato greenhouse. All of our tomatoes were started in cowpots. So we put a single plant into a 4-inch cowpot, grow them out, and then when we transfer them to a 5-gallon bag, you're just taking, and understand that when we're handling the plants in the cowpots, we're not handling the pot anymore, we're handling the plant.
Yeah.
You pick up the plant, you drop it in, and you put the soil around. And there's no wilting, there's no anything. It's just, they just keep going. When you have, like these guys, this is melons. So I get this, this is actually, so I get this in from another grower.
Yeah,
So
and the little ones, then you transfer them to the cow pots.
So then you take this plant, and you're going to pull this out. But you know what? That totally, so there's your roots.
Yeah.
But you're going to totally stress this plant out. And this you're not going to stress out at all, because you're just going to drop it into the ground. I don't allow any of my employees, if I have an employee that smokes, they are not allowed in here. Because cigarettes and tobacco,
Mosaic viruses.
yep, tobacco mosaic virus. And so I've had really successful tomato crops over the last, because I'm such a pain about, you can't come in here if you've been playing in the other greenhouse, and you can't come in here if you're a smoker. But these are the plants that were started as little cowpots. And then here they are. So
Lots of tomatoes.
Yeah, really early. Yeah.
but, well, and it's yeah, because this is that's what they started in, was just this. So, you know, we plant the seed in January, transplant them in February, and then by April 1st they're going in here. And then in the center you'll see there's a beehive